I'd like to ask the Chancellor to launch a book. The book is called, in black and white, Australians All at the Crossroads.
We've heard the questions. Where do we start? Where do we go? Where is the wisdom and knowledge? Are we willing to learn? Are we willing to listen? And we've heard that story starts, in part, 50 years ago with the Bark Petition. But everybody in this audience now knows, having listened to our speakers, that the story doesn't begin 50 years ago. It doesn't begin 500 years ago or 5,000 years ago. We're talking about a story still with us that begins at least 50,000 years ago. And what is that? It's 2,000 generations. Try and get your mind around that. But the question is, from that, we've been told, where do we go in the next 10 years? How do we build a better Australia? And I'm here to launch a book, which is one little part of that, as you've heard from the Vice-Chancellor. It's called In Black and White, Australians All at the Crossroads. This is its launch, although I have to tell you, this is a book that's had more launches than Dame Nellie Melba had farewells. I stand before you as the 5th person to launch this book. It was launched, I think, by Adam Giles in the Northern Territory, by Marcia Langton, I think, in Victoria, by Mick Dodson in Canberra, and by Mr. Wyatt, Ben Wyatt, in Perth. And I'm very happy to launch the book, not least because I wrote the foreword. And in that foreword, I reflected on what we've been talking about in this wonderful Yarramundi lecture, which is how we can learn from failure. Because if we can't learn from failure, we are not going to write this new page of Australia's history. I reflected on failure, which of course was in part systemic, successive governments of all persuasions, failing adequately to address these issues of embracing and learning from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians. But I also reflected that, having been part of the system, that the failure was also personal. So I reflected in my foreword on failure, systemic and personal. I actually didn't think this was a big deal until I picked up the Weekend Australia and saw mea culpa. I was responsible. It's curious and it's worrying, because if we cannot learn from our mistakes, if we can't address the failures, we will not learn for tomorrow. We'll just keep making, in various ways, the same old mistakes. And if we always do what we've always done, we're always going to get what we've always got. And at a profound level, for Australia, it's failure. Well, this book I'm launching seeks to redress that, seeks to learn from the mistakes that we've made. It's got a very large number of articles, including by Warren Mundine, who was, of course, the person who gave last year's Yarramundi lecture. With some of these articles, I agree very strongly. With some of the articles in here, I think are absolutely wrong-headed. You will read this book and see the same. And there'll probably be different articles and chapters from the ones I've identified. That does not matter. What we need is a book that can seek to stimulate debate on how we do learn, how to go forward together. This is a book that I urge you to buy and to read. It will provoke interest, provoke debate, and I think provoke new ways of doing things. So congratulations to its authors and editors, Rhonda Craven, Anthony Dillon, and Nigel Parbury, all from the University of Western Sydney. And I'm going to get Nigel to come up and say a few words now.
Good afternoon. First of all, Professor Rhonda Craven is unavoidably detained at an international conference in Singapore. She particularly asked me to be sure to convey to the Chancellor how honoured she is that such a stellar champion of Koori education, a person who has dedicated his life to making a difference, is not only launching our book, but has also written a powerful and extremely apt foreword, giving all of us the benefit of his unique experience, thoughtful insight, and deep understanding. And importantly, not being afraid to say things which may not please everyone. On Rhonda's behalf particularly, and from all of us, thank you, Chancellor, for being committed to no-holds-barred truth-telling and making a real difference. Briefly, where this book comes from, as we point out in our editor's preface, of course it's good that more and more Indigenous Australians are realising their potential, and you've seen some of that this afternoon. But it is appalling in the lucky country that the general picture, the shameful reality, is still wall-to-wall disadvantage. What is worse, aggregating statistics across the country not only buries Aboriginal achievement both in communities and in the mainstream, but even worse, it masks appalling outcomes, especially, but by no means only, in remote Australia, most particularly on Aboriginal lands. So the real potential of Aboriginal Australia continues to be wasted rather than contributing as it could and should to individuals, families, communities' well-being, and of course to Australia's well-being, because we're all in this together. Everyone agrees disadvantage has to be eradicated. No one can agree how. Even the road to effective solutions is unclear. Debate is stuck at the crossroads. To make matters worse, some opinions get disproportionate space in all the media, and balancing views are not easy to find. And even worse, far too much of what passes for informed debate on Aboriginal affairs is conducted from entrenched positions, too often proceeding from or degenerating into heresies and hostilities, bombs throwing from the trenches. That's why this book, In Black and White, Australians All at the Crossroads, what we tried to do was illuminate the issues by a wider range of established and emerging Indigenous and non-Indigenous thinkers, black fellas and white fellas both, about the root causes of the problems and how they play out on the ground. And we hoped that experiences and ideas from the community base right up to the heights of policy may reveal the common ground that is absolutely essential to working out real answers and practical programs that will make a difference. Now, the subtitle says Australians All at the Crossroads. I have to tell you, originally the subtitle was going to be Indigenous Affairs at the Crossroads, and I dug my heels in because I thought, if you put out a subtitle like that, no one's going to want to read it. But more to the point, if you say Australians All at the Crossroads as a subtitle, that points to the national anthem, and what that's saying is that it's about all of us. It's not just Aboriginal people having an opinion, it should matter to everybody because it's about all of us. So for all of us, it's imperative to put an end to the wastage of Aboriginal talents and Aboriginal lives that has blighted the potential of Australia for far too long. Lastly, let me refer to my chapter and Rhonda's chapter, Together We Can't Lose. And one of the ideas in that, and something that I've been plugging for years, is that culture influence doesn't work one way, it's a two-way street. And so surely the typical Aussie traits that we celebrate as quintessentially Australian, like the fair go and everybody being equal and the sense of humour, the colour of our language, arguably they've got to come from Aboriginal Australia as much as from England or Europe or anywhere else us Aussies have come from the shore as well as off the boats and out of the ground. And this, I think, has enormous implications for reconciliation and a real Australia. If we think of Aboriginal Australians as a giant spectrum and us whitefellas at the other end, in other words, if we want to bang on about difference till the end of time, then reconciliation could take another 200 years. But if we want to focus on and celebrate what we have in common rather than what divides us, then we have surely a far better chance of achieving the vision. And the vision, let me remind you, is the great vision of the Council for Aboriginal Reconciliation all those years ago, a united Australia which respects this land of ours, values the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander heritage, and provides justice and equity for all. And let's be clear about this, the alternative could well be a separate and alienated race of people till the end of time. Thank you.